everyone, my name is Lisa and I am the chef at Revive Wellness. Today I'm in my home kitchen and I thought it would be fun to cook a couple of things for you. Super simple, super quick, easy things for you. This is part 2 of my webinar series on meal planning, and I really hope you're able to check out part 1 because there was a lot of really good information in there. But if not, you can watch it anytime for free on myvivainc.com. So please check that out if you have a chance. And there are also a lot of other awesome webinars on myvivainc.com as well that are facilitated by our awesome dietitians as well as our amazing psychologists. So please check those out as well. There's a lot of awesome content there. So I finished off part 1 of my webinar by talking about the concept of repurposing leftovers, which basically consists of preparing one meal and then using the leftovers from that meal as the base for another entirely different meal the next day. So really cutting down on that meal prep time, keeping things simple, and then also keeping things interesting by, making it different the next day. So win-win for sure. So today I wanted to make a couple things. The first thing I'm going to make is something that is kind of a go-to recipe for me, something that I make a lot in my home, and that is individual meatloaves, so little mini meatloaves, and I'm going to make them in my muffin tin. And so that is awesome because I think it's awesome because you can freeze them as little individual guys there, or you can use them as your repurposed leftovers. So I'm going to show you how to do that as well. So let's get started. This is super easy. It's going to come together in minutes. Really, with meatloaf, it mostly consists of just assembling for the most part. So I have done a little bit ahead for you today because of the setup of my kitchen. I didn't want to be cooking on my stove behind me too much and having my back to you. So what I did here was saute some veggies. So I have a mixture of grated carrots, grated zucchini, some chopped onion, and some garlic that's been chopped really fine too. So I sauteed that in just a little bit of canola oil, and the reason behind that is just softening those vegetables up a little bit so they're not really hard, and also evaporating off some of that moisture that's in there, because if you don't do that, your meatloaves are going to be they're going to have too much moisture and they're going to kind of fall apart and just be too wet. So that is the purpose behind that. And so I've let that cool a little bit here, and I have a pound of lean ground beef here as well. You can use a combination of ground beef and ground pork if you want, or even some ground turkey would be awesome too. So I'm going to add those sauteed vegetables in here. And this meatloaf recipe is actually kind of an Italian flavor going on here. So really, really awesome flavor going on there. Okay, have those veggies in there, and then I have a couple other ingredients. So I have my spices here, so that is kind of your typical Italian spices. So I have basil, I have oregano, I have a bit of thyme, and some red pepper flakes because I love a little bit of kick in there, salt and pepper. So super simple, mostly things we all have at home. If you don't have all of those things, then it's totally fine to omit them. Use what you have on hand, or just experiment. Or if you even have Italian seasoning, which consists of most of those things already, then go ahead and use that, I would say. And I will post this recipe for you so you have all the amounts of everything that you need, so that it's really easy for you to make at home anytime. So I'm going to mix that up. I forgot my eggs. Good thing my fridge is right behind me. Okay, and then I have a 1/4 cup of marinara sauce as well. Really, really good flavor in there. And then I'm going to do a couple of eggs. That kind of helps, that does give it some moisture, but the protein also helps to kind of bind it together and help it to hold its shape nicely. So just regular large eggs here. 2 of those. And then usually in meatloaf, there's some kind of dry ingredient that binds it all together. So sometimes it'll be breadcrumbs, sometimes it'll be fresh bread that you've torn up. In this case, I'm going to use some large flake oats. So about 3/4 cup of that. And now it's the mixing part. You get a bit of an arm workout out of this too. You can just mix this by hand too if you want. Some people don't like the texture of ground meat or raw meat on their hands. So you can definitely use a spatula like I'm doing here today as well. And you want to mix it really well until it kind of, looks like a meatloaf mixture, pretty homogeneous. But you don't want to overmix it because that can kind of toughen it up a little bit, and you don't want your meatloaf to be tough. You want it to be really nice and tender. So I'm just going to mix that until it looks kind of like it's come together. And feel free to experiment with different kinds of meatloaves at home. So basically, if you have any favorite meatloaf recipe, your typical meatloaf that has the barbecue sauce on top or ketchup on top, or maybe you've done I've done an Asian meatloaf before that has hoisin sauce on top. Really, any other meatloaf recipe works here, and you can put it in your muffin tin. And the baking time will be decreased as well, which is another bonus to this, that's another reason I love making it in my muffin tin. Okay, so that is all mixed up there. That's kind of what it looks like. You can really see the oats in there, but when it bakes, you'll still see them a little bit, but they kind of absorb in a little bit. Okay, so I have my muffin tin here. And then I have a scoop, which is great for portioning everything out so that it's all the same size. I use this for my muffins, my regular muffins, of course, and then for meatloaves as well. And I have put muffin liners in here, little papers. You can do it without though. If you don't have these on hand, I do recommend spraying the pan with a bit of non-stick spray, or you can lightly butter it or oil it if you want to. It'll just make them come out a lot easier. I'm using the muffin papers just to make cleanup that much easier. So you do really want to pack these pretty much full, and it looks like way too much because if you were making regular muffins, hopefully you can see that. This is a home video. So very full. If you're making regular muffins, you would not want to fill it that full. You don't usually want to go above 2/3 or 3/4 full for muffins because they continue to rise in the oven, of course. But with meatloaves, it's actually kind of the opposite, strangely. So what happens is that you lose a little bit of moisture as it evaporates, and the proteins kind of shrink up a little bit in the oven. So you actually lose a little bit. It kind of does this. So you actually want to pack these as pretty much as tight as they'll go, just about. You don't want them mounded necessarily. I mean, you can do that if that's what you want to do. I just like to do them kind of flush with the top and sort of pack it in there tightly as much as possible. And then it'll shrink down a little bit as it cooks. And you'll have a nice little pre-portioned meatloaf. So normally meatloaf is something I would make on, say, a Sunday night when I'm home and I have time to prep it, maybe not so much on a weekday. But if you're doing these muffin cut meatloaves, then it bakes really quickly in the oven. It really only takes about 20 to 30 minutes, whereas a normal meatloaf done in a loaf pan takes closer to an hour. So this could be done as a weeknight meal if you do it this way. And I'm going to show you a few different ways to use the leftovers. Well, I'm going to show you one way today, but I can tell you about a few different ways to use the leftovers of these. So I'm going to preheat my oven after this and bake it in there until the internal temperature reaches 165 Fahrenheit. And then we'll come back to it. We'll come back to the video shortly here once they're cooked, and I'll show you what the final product looks like. Oh, one last step here after I'm done with these. I have a little bit more of that marinara sauce, and I just want to spread a little bit on top of all of these. So kind of like you would with your ketchup on a normal one, or barbecue sauce. So keeping that Italian flavor going on here. And this is just a store-bought marinara sauce, so something most of us have in our pantries usually. Or even better, if you want to make it at home, please do that. That's always, anytime you can make anything at home, it's always better. But nothing wrong with using a good quality store-bought product either, right? So you just want to spread a bit of that on each one, kind of dividing equally, and it's going to form like a nice little crust on top, which is really, really nice. Kind of bakes on there, which is, I love that. That's my favorite part usually. Okay, I'm gonna have to get some more of this, but you get the idea. Spread a little bit of that on there. I'm gonna pop this in the oven at 350 till they're cooked through. So join me in a few minutes when that's done and I will show you what it looks like. Okay, so I just took my meatloaves out of the oven, so let's have a look at them and see what they look like. So they look pretty similar to what they looked like when they went in, but I'm going to take them out and just sort of put it on a plate for you. So here's where it's awesome to have them in the muffin papers because it really reduces the amount of cleanup and just they come right out. So little individual sized meatloaves. I just love that. I think they're so cute. So I want to talk about a few different ways you can now repurpose these into something else. So there's so many things you could do. And actually I'll start by showing you the first way that we're going to repurpose them. So the first way we're going to do is we're going to turn these guys into spaghetti and meat sauce. Why not? It's already Italian. It's already got some marinara going on. So I have some pasta here and a bowl. So what I'm going to do, so here's what the meatloaves look like, just sort of their individual portions, if you were to just eat them as meatloaves, which please do, they're so good. Okay, so I'm going to put these guys in a bowl so I can kind of mush them up a little bit with a fork. So I'm just going to break them apart. Kind of breaks your heart a little bit to break these apart after you spend all that time making them into meatloaves, but no, this is what you do the second day, right? They've been in the fridge, you break them apart, you can do it by hand if you want, get the kids to help, whatever you want. So you've mushed those up, and the flavors that are already in there are already very Italian, right? I have all those herbs in there and some veggies as well, so I don't even need to really do anything in terms of adding extra flavor. I have my marinara sauce here, I'm just going to add a little bit until it looks like spaghetti and meat sauce, really. And you can eyeball this. Of course, you're going to want to heat this up before you put it on your pasta, but just for the sake of showing you today, I'm just doing it kind of straight out of the jar. So, spaghetti and meat sauce done. Okay, so literally, that looks entirely different than this, right? You would never know that that these were meatloaves before, right? So it's awesome to be able to use it in two different ways. So the first night, of course, you're going to have it as your meatloaf. The second night, have it as your pasta with meat sauce, because I also have extra marinara sauce left over, so may as well use that up. So really awesome way to use that. So some other ways you can use it, you can crumble these up and put them inside tacos if you want. You can eat them as sliders if you want as well. So put them in between little slider buns and you have like a little hamburger. You can put them into a chili. So if you have some canned beans in your pantry, some corn, crumble those up, put them in a pot with maybe some more canned tomatoes as well, and you have a chili. So it's really easy, and that uses mostly pantry ingredients, which lots of people already have on hand. So really anything that you would use ground meat in, the sky is the limit here. So, and like I said before, there's so many different ways you can make meatloaf. Say you wanted to repurpose this into tacos, then instead of the marinara sauce, you put some salsa in the mixture as well as on top. And then that makes it a little bit more Mexican flavored. Maybe some cumin and cayenne and some chili powder as the spices instead of the Italian herbs. And then you have some sort of Mexican flavors and you crumble it up and put it in a taco shell and then you have tacos the next day. So I just love the idea of repurposing leftovers. It just makes life so much easier. It takes care of 2 or more meals for your week and you don't really have to think twice about it. And this first meal wasn't even that hard to do either. So I hope that this gets the creative juices flowing, and I hope that you give these a try, and I hope that when you do some meal planning at home, you're able to think creatively and figure out some ways to repurpose some of your other leftovers. If you haven't checked out part 1 of my webinar, please do so, and there's a whole bunch of other ideas in there if you're looking for some more inspiration. So thank you so much for watching today, and have a great rest of your day.